In this video, I want to talk about something a little bit different when it comes to Resident Evil. Something I think made the first three games in the series quite special. I don't know if it has a name, so I'll just call it story interactivity. Like, what happened to it? The effects your actions have on the characters in the story and how the story itself unfolds in that sense. It appears like it's something that has been completely ignored after 3, Resident Evil 3. The event short-term outcome mechanics has completely been snubbed from the series and also from the industry, because stuff like that used to be pretty common in games, when games at least were simpler to make. And I think Resident Evil 1 is a great example of that. In the original game, there's multiple events whose outcome can be influenced by what the player does. I don't think I even know all the possible combinations and outcomes, but this is something that keeps the game fresh and replayable. The chance to save or not the other characters, multiple endings, different ways to deal with Plant 42, different optional character interactions. Resident Evil 1 is jam-packed with these things, and it is what makes it special, in my opinion. Not even the remake, which is a really good game, was able to replicate all the character interactions, for example, that affect the endings. That's one of the aspects, actually, that has been nerfed the most in Resident Evil 1 Remake. For example, in the original, whether Barry dies or lives is decided via a possible number of different interactions with him, while in the remake is reduced to just give Barry his gun back, and that decides whether he dies or not. In the original, it was a little bit more nuanced, actually more fun. Also because, I mean, in terms of some cutscenes as well were not really fixed, let's say, because you could, depending on what you did, you could witness a cutscene in a playthrough, and maybe in the next playthrough you didn't do that thing, and then the same cutscene wouldn't play. So it's something that has been lost. And if we look at Resident Evil 2 instead, we did lose this system, but the system that was in place in Resident Evil 1. But they made up for it with the zapping system, at least. So you have 4 slightly different versions of the story: Leon A, and Leon B, and Claire A and Claire B. You start the playthrough with a character, and then you'll play the B scenario with the other one. It's a different way of managing the event effect mechanic, but it still works. Objects will be in different places, and some things in the story will change quite a bit. For example, Sherry being infected. Sherry gets infected in Claire A, but not in Claire B. So that's a pretty big difference. And you get pretty much 4 different playthroughs. So it's a different system compared to Resident Evil 1, but it's still valid and interesting in its own way. because you get at least four full playthroughs out of your game in that sense. Which, I mean, for a Resident Evil, four playthroughs is not bad at all. You definitely get your money's worth in that sense. If you wanna see everything, of course. I mean, not even counting the Hanks scenario or the extreme battle. That adds even more replayability. With Resident Evil 3 instead, they kind of went back to a similar system to Resident Evil 1. But not exactly the same, it's just another spin on it. At certain points in the game, you'll be required to decide between two choices, and each choice can change some things. For example, whether or not you get to fight Nemesis or visit a specific place. I mean, it's minor locations, but still, it makes the difference because it lets you see something more. And one of these choices will also decide which ending you get. So yeah, even different endings return in 3, even though it's just only 2. And the difference is really minor. The only difference in the end between the two endings is Barry coming to save you, and while in the other he doesn't come, and you just get out of the city with your own with the chopper you find. And some enemy encounters and objects placement will also be subjected to variation in the game, because the game has a randomizer in its code, I guess. So you'll get lots of variables to play with and have fun. So as you see, each of the classics had something special that made the game and its story feel more interactive and promote replayability. Then after Resident Evil 3, this whole thing disappeared for some reason. The only other time something remotely similar was tried is in Resident Evil 7, which was supposed to be like a soft reboot. It was supposed to be the new Resident Evil 1. They clearly tried to replicate Resident Evil 1 with that, but it failed. It was a failure in that sense. It failed miserably because it was the only thing that changes the ending is a binary choice. And honestly, the choice is really stupid as well, because if you choose to save Mia, okay, well, you get the good ending. But if you choose to save Zoe, you get the bad ending. And the choice really doesn't change much in the way the game plays forward. Because Zoe dies immediately, so it's not like you play as Zoe, for example, in the boat section, if you choose to save Zoe. So it was a pointless choice. It was all fast. But yeah, I mean, why has Capcom stopped using this thing? In my opinion, it's probably because games got too expensive and bigger, harder to make. So having something like this that pretty much forces the developer to create a relatively different part of the story, which the player may not even see, because most people only play games once. So if the developers make a bunch of content that is optional or locked behind an optional choice, for example, most people won't be able to see this content. And I think this is why they stopped doing it. Also because the rising costs. So if they have to put resources into something, they probably want to put them in the single version of the story they will make. But honestly, if I have to give my opinion, I think having the game have multiple even small differences, because they're not big differences in the first 3 games, but except in some cases, but most of them are relatively small differences. I think it can make the story feel more alive, because we're not talking about an RPG. Resident Evil is not an RPG, so even having small choices affect your playthrough in a meaningful way was something really cool, in my opinion. And a lot of games used to do this. Even think, for example, Metal Gear Solid 1. You decide which ending you get, depending on whether you saved Meryl or not, for example. I mean, whether you resist the torture room or not. Yeah, that's a better way to explain it. But yeah, this was very common, I think, in the PS1 era. But like I said, it just stopped, probably because of those 2 reasons I just mentioned: the rising costs, and also the fact that the software houses cannot afford to waste quotes on quotes, to waste time and effort and resources into content that some people will not see. I mean, if I think about it, I think the last big game that did this was probably The Witcher 2, because you could see completely different parts of the story depending on the choices you made. Like, if you chose something, you went on a completely different path compared to if you made the other choice, if you had made the other choice. So, and yeah, I mean, maybe it was not the last game, but it was definitely one of the latest game to do it, Witcher 2, I mean. And yeah, it was definitely more common. But like I said, games got too expensive to make, so it's something that has been lost. And the game industry has suffered for it, because games now are definitely less interesting because of this, and less replayable as well. I mean, if I had to give my opinion in this sense, I prefer the Witcher 2 approach rather than the Witcher 3 approach. I want to be able to see completely different locations in my story, depending on the choice. Locations and interactions with the characters, depending on the choice I make. Instead of getting the open world treatment, where you only get like slight differences in cutscenes, like Witcher 3 does, for example. But yeah, I mean, I guess having the possibility to influence the story even a little is better than not having it at all. So yeah. But yeah, let me know your thoughts about this whole thing, because I've not seen many people talking about it in general, especially in relation to Resident Evil. It's always about tank controls or TPS controls. Honestly, I don't really give much of a shit about this thing, because I like both. I like TPS controls and tank controls. I think they're both fun. They can serve different purposes, because what you can do with TPS controls you cannot do with tank controls and fixed cameras, and vice versa. They give different possibilities in terms of gameplay, stylistic choices, narrative choices as well, visual narrative, and so on. And in terms of the direction the game wants to take. So, but yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.